Humans' bad treatment of the planet has raised sea levels to the point where most of the Earth is now flooded in the year 2063. Only 2 continents remain, and they are currently at odds over land and resources. The Sentinel, a military outpost in the middle of the sea between both continents, has a crew of 4 soldiers who are growing frustrated. Their contract expired 3 months ago after 2 years of service, but the relief crew has yet to arrive. Food is running low, so Cassidy and Sullivan decide to go fishing one stormy night. Surprisingly, they perform admirably and fill their large net with numerous catches. Meanwhile, their superior officer Hendricks notices that the storm is becoming too violent, so he orders Baines to secure the Sentinel's giant explosive. The waves begin to grow large and violent at that point, affecting the outpost pipelines. Baines rushes to fix them and gets his hand stuck, forcing him to struggle underwater for several minutes before being able to free himself. Outside, the waves wash away the net, and the duo loses their catch. Sullivan tries to grab something else, but the wind is becoming too strong and dangerous, forcing him to rush back inside before he is taken away as well. Everyone returns just in time before the massive wave hits the structure, causing it to shake and pushing water through every entrance, but the Sentinel survives. The next morning, the group discusses how to reduce their resource consumption while eating military rations for breakfast. When Baines learns that the fish were lost, he becomes enraged, and Sullivan retaliates by insulting Baines for taking parts from his kitchen to repair the main pipes. An argument ensues, and Hendricks reminds them to act like adults by directing their attention to the repairs. Baines wonders why they don't request relief right away, but Hendricks reminds him that the telegraph is only for reporting. Following that, Sullivan sends out the daily report via telegraph. He informs the base that there have been no events, and they respond that there have been no events there as well as in previous months. Sullivan later joins Hendricks outside, and after some jokes about their air dancer, Sullivan looks at the sea through the binoculars. He's taken aback when he notices a ship approaching, which Cassidy confirms when she checks the radar. Sullivan is overjoyed because he believes it is the relief, but Hendricks is suspicious and orders Baines to bring some weapons in case it is the enemy. Cassidy attempts to contact the ship but receives no response, so Hendricks decides to give the ship another chance. He hands Sullivan a gun and instructs him to take the boat to meet the ship and ensure that there are no enemies to be concerned about. Sullivan takes off and approaches the ship, calling out for any potential passengers, but there is still no response. Sullivan boards the ship with his gun drawn and begins investigating, becoming increasingly agitated as he notices the clues. Dirt has covered objects, the radio is broken, and there is untouched food in the cabinets. Hendricks attempts to contact him for an update, but Sullivan ignores him as he discovers 4 bags marked for them. This had been their relief, but something happened to the crew and they vanished, denying them the opportunity to return home. Hendricks assumes Sullivan was attacked because he isn't responding, so he wants to shoot the ship before it approaches the Sentinel. He requests one of the explosive keys from Cassidy, and when she hesitates, he reminds her that this is protocol. Hendricks begins activating the explosive with his own key, and before firing, he makes one last attempt to contact Sullivan. Fortunately, Sullivan responds this time, and the attack is called off. When Cassidy requests her key, Hendricks informs her that he is keeping both as punishment for her hesitation in following orders. Sullivan then tows the ship over to the Sentinel. While Hendricks investigates the ship, Sullivan reunites with Cassidy, and they spend a few moments getting frisky to compensate for the scare they just experienced. Baines informs the team of everything he's managed to salvage from the ship a few hours later, while they're having a quick iodine bath. He's also certain that this was a relief, and that the engine hadn't run in months. Sullivan wishes to send a message to the base, but Hendricks forbids it until more information is obtained, because nothing about this makes sense, even if it does count as an event. The crew is growing tired and wary of Hendricks' attitude, especially now that he has both keys. Hendricks checks the ship's navigation history after the shower and writes down all the coordinates, which he takes back to the Sentinel to plot on a map to track their journey. Meanwhile, Cassidy and Sullivan speculate on what the world must be like out there after not seeing it in 2 years. Sullivan admits to sending a message behind Hendricks' back, so they'll find out tomorrow. Hendricks discovers his 3 soldiers suspiciously waiting next to the telegraph the next morning, and Baines confesses the truth. Hendricks intends to chastise them for it, but the machine responds immediately. The group is ecstatic until they read what it says. It's the same message Sullivan sent the night before. It's only then that they realize they've been in contact with the base for a long time, and the computer has been sending back the no events message Sullivan sends every day. While Hendricks continues to work with the coordinates on the map, Baines enters the ship with a plan. Sullivan spots him coming back one night, but Baines refuses to explain himself. The two end up drinking together, and Baines tells him about his family back home, assuming his family is still alive. Suddenly, Baines admits that he believes he can repair the ship. Sullivan rushes to tell Cassidy the news and invites her to leave with him to live in one of the few safe towns left on the continent. But Cassidy is hesitant and refuses to believe what she's hearing. The next day, Sullivan sneaks into the ship with Baines to assist him in repairing the engine, and the two work together to complete the task. When they emerge, they find Hendricks waiting for them, and he orders them to dismantle the ship in order to use its parts to repair the Sentinel. He won't let them leave because he claims that staying here is their obligation, regardless of whether their contract has expired. Sullivan refuses to die here like others have in the past, and Baines agrees, but when Cassidy joins them, she does not show her support. Hendricks dismisses their arguments and orders the team to work on repairs, threatening them with his gun if they do not comply. Cassidy volunteers to talk to Hendricks next because the guys are furious and afraid he's been too trigger-happy lately. Cassidy tells Hendricks that she understands how he feels after losing his last squad, but leaving doesn't mean dying, rather, it means salvation. Meanwhile, Sullivan and Baines are beginning to wonder if they will have to go to war with their boss in order to get what they want. Hendricks interrupts their conversation, admitting Cassidy made a good point. Since they don't have communications, someone should report to the base. 2 people are allowed to stay, while 2 others must leave. Hendricks is obviously staying, and Cassidy has also volunteered to stay. Baines is pleased with this development, but Sullivan is devastated. Moments later, Sullivan speaks privately with Cassidy, attempting to persuade her to accompany him, either by replacing Baines or defying Hendricks. He's so desperate to make her happy that he offers to take her place or stay here with her. But Cassidy snaps and tells him she doesn't love him, that he's only been a human necessity. Cassidy bursts into tears as a distraught Sullivan rushes out of the room. Sullivan and Baines work on packing that night. Hendricks hands Sullivan a letter to take to the base and remarks on how the enemy is exactly like them, soldiers who simply want to protect their homes. Sullivan reminds Hendricks that they could all leave together, but Hendricks refuses, citing the need for someone to keep an eye on the explosive. After that, Hendricks goes to finish his work on the map and coordinates, where he makes a startling discovery. The relief ship deliberately steered away from the Sentinel, which makes no sense. Hendricks rushes to check on Cassidy, suspicious, but he doesn't dare to say anything. The team awakens the next morning to the sound of an alarm because another ship has appeared on the radar. The men rush to their positions to defend the Sentinel, while Cassidy tries in vain to contact the ship. Hendricks refuses to send anyone this time and orders the team to fire, but their first bullet misses. Cassidy notices their ship is missing as they prepare to reload, just as Sullivan and Baines finally see it clearly once the fog clears. They refuse to shoot again, but by the time Cassidy arrives to warn them, it's too late. Hendricks has his gun drawn and shoots Baines. Hendricks was the one who put the ship back out last night, and to prove he's serious, he shoots the air dancer. Baines continues to refuse to destroy the ship, and Hendricks responds by shooting his ear, prompting Sullivan to take the cannon and destroy the ship before anyone dies. Baines, in rage, attempts to pursue Hendricks, but Cassidy knocks him out first with a fire extinguisher. Sullivan and Cassidy then lock Hendricks in the pantry, and Cassidy returns both keys. Later, an enraged Baines attempts to find Hendricks in order to murder him, and hits Sullivan when he tries to stop him. Cassidy consoles him with words, but Baines still leaves to get drunk alone and unpack his belongings, causing him to cry. Cassidy later mentions Hendricks' need for an iodine bath, but Baines refuses to let him out and announces his resignation. Sullivan tells Cassidy that they have no choice but to go through every single channel on the telegraph until one of them works, and Cassidy uses the opportunity to admit she hadn't meant what she said about him. She just wanted him to leave without worrying about her, but Sullivan is hesitant to accept her excuse. Later that afternoon, Sullivan brings Hendricks some food and wonders why he changed his mind about leaving. Hendricks shares the information he gleaned from the coordinates. The relief ship was supposed to arrive 3 months ago, but something caused it to depart. This implies that there is a traitor among them who desires the explosive. Sullivan doesn't believe him and walks out, locking the door behind him. While Sullivan spends the rest of the day sending SOS messages to every channel, Baines continues to drink and work in his workshop, but he soon loses his mind and destroys everything he's built. Later that evening, Cassidy shows Sullivan a photo of herself as a child with her family, explaining that they were killed by the enemy when she was a child. The next morning, Baines discovers Cassidy sleeping in the communications room. He attacks Cassidy while spouting nonsense about a lost future, as if he wants to take advantage of her. Cassidy manages to push him away after some struggle, unaware that Baines has stolen the keys. Cassidy then goes looking for Sullivan to tell him what happened, but Baines' voice can be heard over the speakers announcing that he will detonate the explosive. Sullivan and Cassidy rush back to the communications room to try to calm him down, citing his family as a reason to live. Baines sobs as he steps away from the controls, but when Cassidy returns the keys, he admits that he simply forgot the last digit of the activation code. Sullivan believes it is time to let Hendricks go, but Baines has shocking news. He attempted to kill him earlier, but Hendricks was gone when he entered the pantry. He had ended things for himself, as indicated by an open window. Cassidy and Sullivan are devastated when they discover Baines told the truth in the pantry. He was unable to deal with his grief. Sullivan reads the letter Hendricks wrote to the base and is surprised to see that Hendricks had asked for his command to be extended. Cassidy then shows Sullivan the now clean workshop to demonstrate that Baines is feeling better and building again. Baines admits his wife was pregnant and he never got to meet the baby, prompting Sullivan to forgive him for his drunken outburst. Baines expresses his gratitude with a hug before boarding the boat and returning to his work salvaging items from the sea. Cassidy is accompanying him, so Sullivan gives her a gun in case of emergency, and Cassidy thanks him with a kiss. Moments later, Sullivan decides to go fishing again, and when he pulls up the net, he finds Hendricks' body with a wound on his head, indicating that he was murdered and that there is a traitor among them. While Sullivan searches his friends' profiles for clues, Cassidy contemplates a strategy with Baines in the boat. Sullivan then examines Hendricks' map and formulates a theory. As a storm approaches, Sullivan checks the beacon outside and confirms that it can be removed and moved. This means that someone removed the beacon from the boat and forced the ship to follow them instead of going to the Sentinel, thereby explaining the coordinates. Then someone killed the relief team and abandoned the ship. Only Cassidy returns from the short trip a few hours later, claiming that Baines fell and died while attempting to grab some plastic. Sullivan immediately suspects she murdered him and that she was the traitor all along, but he is too scared to say anything. Cassidy wakes up alone in bed the next morning. Sullivan only communicates with her via walkie-talkie, explaining that he knows she killed everyone and is spying for the enemy, but he won't let her have the explosive. Cassidy then realizes she's lost the keys and dashes to the communications room, where she finds Sullivan in the process of detonating the explosive. He doesn't mind blowing up the Sentinel with them still inside because they have no future. Cassidy tries to explain that people in her homeland are suffering and that she hates lying to him while Sullivan holds her at gunpoint, but Sullivan doesn't believe her and detonates the explosive. Instead of exploding, the machine displays a funny little phrase that Baines liked to repeat, which leads them to believe that Baines reprogrammed the explosive so that it can no longer be used for destruction. Finally, Sullivan and Cassidy have a brief conversation. They agree that no matter which side of the war they are on, they will protect the Sentinel together and continue to survive. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below, and if you liked the video, please like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you in the next video.